Weapons usually fail in war. They malfunction. They arrive too late. They promise more than they deliver. But once in a great while, a weapon works exactly as intended, so perfectly, that it terrifies the people who built it. And when that happens, the weapon does not become famous. It does not get parades or monuments. It is buried deliberately, quietly, and completely. Because some weapons are too dangerous to be known. This is the story of the weapon that worked too well and was buried forever. By 1940, the air war over Europe had reached a brutal stalemate. Bombers flew higher to avoid flak. Anti-aircraft guns fired blindly into clouds. Most shells exploded uselessly in empty sky. To shoot down an aircraft, a shell had to score a direct hit, an almost impossible task against fast-moving targets at high altitude. Thousands of rounds were fired for every plane destroyed. Defenses were loud, expensive, and inefficient. Then, somewhere deep inside a laboratory, a problem was quietly solved, and the solution terrified everyone who understood it. The weapon did not look revolutionary. It was not large. It did not glow. It did not roar. It was a small metal device, about the size of a light bulb, hidden inside an artillery shell. But inside it was something no weapon had ever contained before, a tiny radar. This device was known as the proximity fuse. Instead of exploding on impact, or at a preset altitude, the shell detonated automatically when it came close to an object. Not when it hit the aircraft, when it passed near it. The fuse emitted radio waves. When those waves reflected off a nearby target, the signal changed, and the shell exploded instantly. Accuracy was no longer required. Near was enough. In testing, the results were unbelievable. Anti-aircraft guns suddenly became lethal. One shell could do the work of dozens. Bombers that would normally survive entire flak barrages were torn apart mid-air. For the first time in history, the sky itself became hostile. The weapon worked too well. The implications were staggering. If this technology fell into enemy hands, it would change everything. Aircraft would be slaughtered. Naval guns would become devastatingly precise. Even ground warfare would be transformed. And there was a terrifying possibility no one wanted to say out loud. If the enemy captured just one intact shell, they could reverse engineer the fuse. And then the advantage would vanish. Or worse, turn against its creators. The development of the proximity fuse became one of the most closely guarded secrets of the war. Only a handful of people knew how it worked. Fewer still knew where it was used. The United States Navy and the United States Army imposed extreme restrictions. If a shell failed to explode, retrieval teams were sent immediately. If there was a risk of capture, crews were ordered to dump ammunition overboard. Some ships were instructed to self-destruct shells rather than let them fall into enemy hands. This was not paranoia. It was fear. The first combat use of the proximity fuse was not over Europe. It was at sea, in the Pacific. Japanese aircraft attacked Allied fleets relentlessly. Dive bombers screamed down from the sky. Kamikaze tactics would later push this to horrifying extremes. Conventional anti-aircraft fire struggled to stop them. Then ships equipped with proximity-fused shells opened fire. Planes disintegrated mid-approach. Pilots never reached their targets. Attacks collapsed before they could begin. Sailors watching from decks described the effect as unreal. Aircraft simply vanished in explosions that seemed to hang in the sky. The weapon worked, and now it could not be hidden forever. Eventually, the proximity fuse was authorized for use in Europe, but only under strict conditions. Only when capture was impossible. Only when the consequences justified the risk. One of those moments came during the Battle of the Bulge. In the winter of 1944, German forces launched a massive surprise offensive through the Ardennes. Allied lines buckled. Units were encircled. The situation grew desperate. German infantry relied heavily on massed attacks, waves of troops advancing under artillery support. Allied artillery units were ordered to use proximity-fused shells. The results were devastating. Shells detonated above advancing troops, showering fragments downward. Entire formations were shredded. Attacks collapsed almost instantly. German officers later described it as impossible to fight through. They did not know why. They only knew the sky was killing them. The weapon had changed artillery warfare overnight, and that terrified Allied planners, because if it could do this to infantry, what else could it do? By late 1944, Allied scientists and commanders realized something unsettling. The proximity fuse was not just a wartime advantage. It was a glimpse of the future. A future where weapons no longer required precision, only proximity. Where automation decided when something died. Where humans were removed from the final decision. And that future was arriving too quickly. The war ended before the full implications could be explored. Germany never captured an intact fuse. Japan never reverse-engineered it. The secret held. But what happened next is the most disturbing part of the story. After the war, the proximity fuse did not become public knowledge. It did not enter textbooks. It did not become common technology. Instead, it vanished. Documents were classified, factories dismantled, production lines shut down, thousands of shells were destroyed or sealed away. The weapon was not banned. It was buried. Because everyone involved understood the same thing. If this technology spread uncontrolled, it would change warfare permanently, and not in a way anyone could reverse. The proximity fuse represented a threshold. Once crossed, war would never again rely on human judgment alone. Machines would decide distance. Machines would decide timing. Machines would decide death. And that was only the beginning. Later generations would build smarter systems, faster sensors, automated defenses, missile guidance, radar-triggered detonations, autonomous kill zones. All of it traced back to that small device hidden inside a shell, the weapon that worked too well. For decades, much of its history remained classified. Even veterans who had used it were often unaware of what made it special. They knew only that when it arrived, the war changed, and when the war ended, it disappeared. Today, the proximity fuse is acknowledged as one of the most important technological breakthroughs of World War II. But its legacy is complicated. It did not win the war by itself. It did not end suffering. It revealed something far more unsettling. That once machines can sense and react faster than humans, restraint becomes the most dangerous variable of all. The weapon was buried, not because it failed, but because it succeeded. And sometimes, the most frightening weapons are not the ones that destroy cities, but the ones that make destruction effortless.